joining us for breaking news. Breaking news, your Transcendental Zen OpEd newscast review podcast of just me rambling about the news. Really, the different titles are just to give me options, because I get bored. Today, the 28th day of the 6th month of the first year of Trumptopia, formerly known as 2017. One of the most... I was torn, friends, this being sort of like a headlines talk show, opinion show. I didn't know which headline to run with. There's one headline that really stood out over the last few days that's tough and kind of hardcore. And then the rest of them are all interrelated and kind of like absurd and exhausting. I think out of respect for everyone involved, I'm going to go with the sort of standout. Many of you already know. Probably some of you listening have already seen the footage. If you haven't, obviously I'm not sharing it here. But while I generally don't endorse the sort of mindless consumption of real-life violence video footage, because there's too much of a slippery slope for it to become entertainment and not, challenging, thought-provoking fact, as far as, getting used to watching too much real-life violence on film. But it was a pretty shocking bit of breaking news when the footage from the Philando Castile shooting, the cop cam footage came out, and I was caught unprepared, which is why I haven't made remarks about it until now. I popped on the TV to kind of check in with any of the subtle shifts in Trumptopia-related news and Russia investigation stuff, and the first channel I clicked on was already mid warning about the violent nature of the video, and they were going to show it. Now, first of all, my heart and soul goes out to the family and friends of Philando Castile and of the police officer involved. Because no matter what your opinion is about how the system responded, that cop's is got to deal with this for the rest of his life, and rest assured, that ain't going to be any fun. Now, in terms of him being a lack of a conviction here is outrageous. I don't want to dwell on this for too long, but I do want to say that I think it's really important right now to understand, especially in this particular case, and I'm sure there are many other cases like it, but this one was so, like, you couldn't hide from it, right? It was so just viral. It was so epically just out there already, and I applaud the release of the footage. As painful and as difficult and as traumatizing as it may be. And obviously, I strongly, suggest that people only view it with deep preparation for saying, this is not right. Because watching the footage with as unbiased of a mind as possible, and admitting that I'm not anti-gun, I'm anti the gun profiteers who have set this up, these juxtaposed forces that I'm about to describe, as they set this up as normal in America. And this is why I believe it's important. And I have to reference a meme where I think that while I think many of us, myself included, have felt that this is the self-evident, obvious problem with the gun industry, not with the gun as a tool in and of itself, but with the industry and the way in which it operates today. And I have to give props to Jon Stewart for being someone out there in the sort of mix of the mainstream media that had the balls to put this sentence together. I think many of us have had these kinds of thoughts, but I haven't seen such an eloquent, concise, and perfect expression of it. I certainly haven't come up with a really clear version. And I think that those of us who are outraged are struggling with our outrage, right? Because this seems so self-evident about what the gun industry is creating, this sort of, this perpetual conflict. And let me read Jon Stewart's words, because I'm just rambling, and really he put it perfectly. I wish I had a date on when he aired this, but this is from a while back, probably during early Obama administration. Back during, do you guys remember back in the golden days, when the scariest sort of thing that would hit the news cycle was this whole whiplash reaction to guns? You know, they're going to take our guns away. Oh, we're all going to buy a bunch of more guns. Jon Stewart's words. And I quote, and I think I invite everyone to consider these words deeply. Not just because I am asking, but because I think it's profound what he's hitting on here. And I quote, "We are at the intersection of Open Carry Road and Stand Your Ground Place." I would have chosen Avenue, but that's just me being silly and nitpicky. All right, I continue with his words, and let's really zoom in here. "According to the NRA's basic principles, you have the right to carry a weapon." Right? You do. That's why and that's one of those rights you got to fight for. And that weapon may cause a reasonable person to believe that they are in danger of great bodily injury. And that person, they have the right, if they feel that way, to respond with deadly force with the weapon that they have the right to carry. It's a perpetual violence machine. Forgive me, I didn't read that quote clean. I kind of interjected some auxiliary words. But let's read that again. I'll read it perfectly clean. "We are at the intersection of Open Carry Road and Stand Your Ground Place. According to the NRA's basic principles, you have a right to carry a weapon that may cause a reasonable person to believe that they are in danger of great bodily injury, and they have a right, if they feel that way, to respond with deadly force." It's a perpetual violence machine. This may harken back all the way back to that incident in Florida, because it was the "stand your ground" was like the catchphrase. I can totally see that gentleman's face right now, but I cannot remember his name. And that was like one of those just shocking, painful moments. The young man that was shot and killed was carrying Skittles and a beverage, I believe, and he was walking home in his own neighborhood where he had every right to be, not carrying a weapon at all, and was stopped and interrogated by a guy who had sort of self-appointed himself a sort of armed neighborhood watch, and he invoked the Stand Your Ground law. Forgive me for totally blanking on both of those two people's names right now, but I think you all know what I'm talking about. I didn't prepare that connection. That just sort of came to me, right, while reading the Jon Stewart quote. When you sit down and watch the Philando Castile dash cam, police cam footage, it is patently obvious, it is perfectly clear that Mr. Castile says, "Hey, by the way, in compliance with the law and in a completely non-threatening way, I'm carrying a weapon." Fact. He didn't threaten the cop with it, right, as some people intimated. He didn't wave it around. He didn't, reach for it right away without declaring anything. He was in compliance with the law, and he was an open carry licensed person in a state that loves to open carry. Now, the next thing I noticed about the tape is that the cop clearly does say like, don't pull it out. But Mr. Castile also responds, I'm not pulling it out, or something to that effect. And I believe that what he was reaching for was his wallet to show him his paperwork. That's my interpretation of it. But what's really most important that I think is clearly evident is that the police officer snaps. And without any effort to de-escalate, to walk away, one thing an officer can and should be trained to do is to back away until it is clear what is being brought out. And to be prepared to defend yourself. As opposed to immediately whip out your gun and start shooting. Just because a person reaches for something in compliance with the law, which should have been your next step. A police officer pulls you over and he asks, you declare that you're carrying in compliance with your local state law and that you're going to show him the paperwork, then that officer should be prepared to expect you to bring out paperwork. That officer was clearly like on a hair trigger and filled with all kinds of anxiety at best, anger at worst, and, in the middle ground rather, and potentially, sociopathic, racist hate at worst. I don't know that police officer, and as a, Zenist, I respect all human beings, and I don't judge. I strive for healing. What's important, what I feel is really important, I don't want to spend the whole segment on it because there's so much more news to get to, is that while yes, there should be outrage, and yes, we should be, we have been, everyone has been standing up, we cannot lose sight or brush past or ignore the relationship that's being, or the societal norms that have for many decades already now been laid down by this lobbying machine, this monstrous entity that represents the manufacturer, the multiple manufacturers of a tool which they want you to believe of and think of as completely innocent. And sure, perhaps the tool itself is completely innocent. But imagine if the manufacturers of hammers sold hammers to everybody and then conditioned you to think that that's the best way to, solve your social problems is to beat the shit out of someone with your hammer. And then lobbied for laws that literally made it so that you would feel, be forced to be pitted against each other. Our outrage and our protest and our organization in order to hold people accountable should be focused and directed appropriately. And I say this with all the empathy in the world and all the sympathy in the world for everyone who was hurt and traumatized by this or any other shooting. And as we move forward, and as those people heal, we must not lose sight of that larger, overreaching fact. Gun manufacturers are peddling guns to bad guys as much as they are to good guys. And they are peddling the culture of, it takes a good guy with a gun to stop a bad guy with a gun. As well as peddling the culture of, isn't it sexy and cool to be a bad guy with a gun? Don't believe it? It's out there. Do your research. And we need to I've said it before and I'll say it again, and I don't want to sound like a broken record, but it really is not so much about gun legislation, because the one correct rebuttal is that criminals don't follow gun control laws. Now, one of the things that is lost with the NRA or the extreme right, the gun lovers' response that way, is that and I think that the Democrats play into this because they're, hand in glove, just playing the white hat, right? There's two ways to exercise gun control. Bless it, I'm really running down this rabbit hole, and this isn't even the gun episode. There's two ways to legislate gun control, and I think that this is lost on most people who are choosing which side or who to support politically, or what sort of ideas to rally behind. You can legislate laws that control the owners of guns and their behavior, which may or may not be safe. Those rules, in theory, are targeting the safety or trying to protect the safety of innocent bystanders who may accidentally experience gun accidents, right? Like, lock your gun up. And there's some reasonable rules there. And then there's another set of legislation, which is, I think that this is where they play at making bold attempts, but then they really, when you think about what these rules are that they put in this other category, they're really silly and meaningless. And that's legislation that controls how guns are manufactured and marketed. We don't address the marketing at all, I don't think. I don't recall any serious legislation with teeth about gun marketing. And at first blush, people might go, they don't market guns on TV. I'm like, but how many TV shows do you know that don't have guns? How many movies have you seen in the last year that don't have guns? You may or may not have realized, but that is just as much product placement as when a superhero drinks a Coke. Let that sink in for a minute. And then let's come back to sending love, compassion, and healing energies to both the families, the survivors of Philando Castile, and, forgive me for not knowing the police officer's name, also the police officer himself, for having been a human being that made an evil choice, and his family and network of friends that are negatively impacted by this news. May the police officer, this is my prayer on this, and I know that this is a news show, and it's an op-ed show, and why am I praying about it? Because I believe prayer works, and I'm sure I've rambled about that in other segments. I offer up a prayer to this officer and all officers. Why? Because they're human beings. They are not cogs in a machine. They are being used and conditioned and trained to behave as though they were cogs in a machine, but in truth they are fellow brother and sister human beings with psyches that are traumatized by the violence that they are a part of, that they are cajoled, convinced, brainwashed to being a part of. Because the same companies that will sell the police officers their bulletproof vests and their militarized weapons are the same manufacturers that are selling to shady dealers that then, drop those some of those items into the black market. Follow the money, folks. It's just like the drug problem. The drugs don't come out of Satan's ass. The drugs come from a manufacturer. And the ingredients for the drugs come from manufacturers that also manufacture legitimate things like this fentanyl issue. I mean, that may not be. That's obviously not true about cannabis because that's a plant that goes out of the ground. But I'm talking about hardcore, fentanyl. Breaking news, folks. Although this is really late, and I meant to do a fentanyl episode and I haven't yet. But I'll do a little fentanyl, minute and a half here. Fentanyl is an ingredient to some other major pharmaceutical drug whose product name I can't remember right now. Like I said, I'm not prepared for that. This is just sort of a, it's a dot being connected in the web of bullshit. And now it's, the raw ingredient, which is a pharmaceutical grade product that is hard to manufacture at home. This isn't a meth lab in Indiana creating fentanyl. But the drug dealers and the illicit drug manufacturer labs, the amateur labs, are getting fentanyl somewhere from the black market. It's getting dumped somewhere. By whom? By 1 or 2 or 3 degrees of separation through known business entities to the pharmaceutical companies themselves. Duh. Alright. Enough about that. On to other fake news. To fake news. The fake news of today, this particular cycle right now, it tickles me pink every time I think about it. And it makes me wish I had the computer badass enough and the most recent, Photoshop suite so that I can make my own fake Time News cover with Donald Trump, like shaking hands. I don't have any of those things, nor do I anymore have the like requisite Photoshop skills. But in the news last like 48 hours, if you haven't caught it, and if you have, forgive me for bringing up something that's kind of trite and silly, but it broke recently in the last like day and a half that it is a fact, apparently, according to these news. But the question is, which news is the fake news? Fake news within real news within fake news. It's like a conundrum wrapped inside of a mystery. But it was reported that 5 to 6 Trump properties, Trump towers, here and in other countries, have very prominently placed somewhere in like in their restaurant or their bar, one of their like featured locales or in the lobby, a cover of Time magazine with Trump on it, and some sort of collection of really complimentary headlines about Trump and one random one about Obama, I think, and a really prominent barcode. Now, the real zinger of the story, according to one report on cable news, the barcode itself, if you scan it, it's a barcode created by a website that does tutorials, that does Photoshop tutorials, and it's the barcode to get that points you to the tutorial on how to make your own convincing fake Time magazine cover. It's amazing to me how much energy and effort this president spends convincing his base, because he's not convincing anybody else, I don't think, convincing his base that all of the media is 100% fake news. Now, I understand that there's a large number of people both within his base and outside of his base that hold a slightly different yet often lumped together opinion, and that's that the corporate infrastructure of media ultimately is sort of leaning on the corrupt side, because a very small handful of people own all the media companies in the world. And while that is true, I also do not think that 100% of every news story that comes out of every news outlet is 100% fake. In fact, I think now, because it is economically and politically salient to them, they're stepping up their efforts, some of them, of either pretending to sound more legit and more fact-based, or genuinely are. And then I think also there really are some places out there that tell you the truth in a more direct way. But I find it fascinating. Most every day I flip through the basic spectrum. I hit the PBS NewsHour. I try to catch shows like Democracy Now! on one of the sort of what you call viewer subscriber driven news channels, where they don't get they get very little money from the government and they don't get any corporate money, and they live on subscriber donations from their viewers, and also Fox News, which I've got 3 of them now, I think. A local Fox News, a regular main, middle of, the main flagship Fox News, and then like a businessy one, MSNBC, and CNN. And I talked about it in an earlier segment a few days ago. The echo chamber is really pathetically obvious. Now, I don't think that 100% of 100% is 100% fake. I think that they tell us the truth. They ladle the truth into the mix with a lot of spin and a lot of bias in favor or against Donald Trump, obviously. And that is their job. Kind of by design, because of free market forces, let us say. And I use sarcastic bunny quote ears on that. But Fox, of course, loves to run segments about the extreme alt-left. MSNBC and CNN run a lot of headlines and articles and chit-chats and panel talks about the extreme alt-right. And while, yes, they do present real facts, like, let's say, 22 million people will lose their, that's not a fake news story. The CBO conducted a real, nonpartisan assessment. Oh, and I've got a really fun, interesting factoid here somewhere in my notes about the CBO and why it's funny how Fox News and or Trump and or the GOP and or the right in general are going out of their way to dismiss the CBO's scores lately as inaccurate, as unreliable, as bipartisan, as having an axe to grind against the right. Republican, and this is the interesting fact, and for those of you who don't know this will be breaking news to you, even though it's been standing around and a known thing for a while. Republican Keith Hall is the chair or director or whatever his title is of the CBO. He is a Republican chosen by Republicans who takes pride in himself as being centrist and as bipartisan as possible. And everyone, it's the CBO is one of those agencies, whether this is real or not, I guess I'd have to go visit the CBO. So everyone's opinion about it is sort of meaningless because until you go on to go visit the CBO, you're just choosing a bullet point to repeat, right? But and I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. It does seem to me, from everything I've ever seen, in terms of their numbers. Obviously, they've been around forever. Some people have never heard of them before and are only just angry at them because the president has laid some shade their way. But I think that I give them enough benefit of the doubt to say they are probably reporting some legit facts to us. And so these facts probably can be verified by other means, the other open source sources. And that's that Trump Care, as shaped right now, will take 22 million Americans' healthcare insurance away, while increasing premiums for those who remain in the system and lowering overall coverage in an effort to rendering, essentially, a pricing out of people in the middle to the lower end of the spectrum. Even if they stay on board, they're going to get priced out. Even if they want to and they support Trump Care, if they make less than X amount, they're going to get priced out because even with subsidies, the counterbalancing costs of the new arrangement will be, in other words, the actual material cost of being sick and going will be like, I'm not even going to bother buying that healthcare. It's not worth it. Spend all that money. And then still have to pay all this more once you get there. And you'll know, and I pointed this out before, and I'm sure others in the media have too, because the media, whatever spin objective they might be meeting, they try to use reality because ultimately that sells. If you peddle only fake lies, then that ultimately kind of pisses people off because those eventually can be debunked. And they pointed out, someone else pointed out that what was it? Oh crap! I just blanked. Hooray! And this is why I'm not a professional in the real media because I suck. No, if I had been on a real show, I'd have an earpiece and someone would be telling me your next bullet point is this. There was a connection there that I was trying to draw, and I'm totally blanking on, so it'll come back to me. But so why? I mean, the real facts are that all of that equates into a massive, massive cut in funding in order to accommodate a $590 billion. That's almost $600 billion. Or am I misquoting the number? Let me verify the number. I wrote it down and then I looked it up. Yeah, no, sorry. It's not 100. It's $8 billion cuts. $8 billion cuts in healthcare funding for people at the lower end of the spectrum, and in order to accommodate and make room for $6 billion tax cuts for corporations and individuals that categorically can only be considered extremely wealthy. And the hypocrisy by which the president has tried to, defend all this is just to call everything that doesn't, like, it's fake news. And the irony of all of his, claiming that everybody else is out to use fake news, and here he has his own Trump towers are pretty fucking bullshitty. Speaking of Trump towers, there's some interesting Trump tower news. This was reported, I believe, on MSNBC. There's a Trump tower in Toronto that's falling apart financially, not physically. And the joint venture behind that tower is mind-boggling. That it really should clarify. Now, is this part of the Russia fake news lie? I don't know. I guess we'd have to go to Canada to find out. But I think that given that other things have panned out from the left-sided media, because the right just sort of ignores all this as much as possible and castigates the left, slanted news in any way, shape, or form, and as opposed to addressing the issue or trying to defend the stories that may actually be true. The left, I think, is certainly trying to appeal to progressives and trying to, as fair and balancedly as possible sounding, be against Trump and be in favor of the resist movement. But here's this Trump thing that's mind-blowing. There was a joint venture, business agreement between a Russian oligarch named Alexander Schreider, I can't read my own handwriting. This note is from like a day and a half ago. And the Trump Organization. All right? This is just another on the list of shady-ass Trump buildings with shady-ass joint ventures that are going through shady-ass things. This particular one in Toronto, another agency or another group has kind of sort of absorbed it and taken it away and is breaking ties with Trump Tower. But in its history, according to the report I watched, it was on the verge of collapse, this Toronto Trump Tower. And it received a massive and mysterious cash infusion from VEB Bank. Now, this is something that I've seen enough reporting on to think is not made up. And sort of like that the right is going, la, 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 let's not talk about it. Because it doesn't, there's no way to report the facts without giving in and conceding that maybe, just maybe, the Russia investigation is not as they describe it. But VEB Bank, I don't know what the acronym stands for in Russian. I'm sure it's some crazy fun thing that's hard to pronounce. But it has been a target of a serious investigation by nonpartisan, bipartisan agencies for money laundering out of Russia. For both, organized crime, some sort of Russian mafia, and oligarchic, transnational corporate, political money laundering. The chair of that bank is a confirmed former KGB agent who, very curiously, just happened to literally, fact has been checked, taken a meeting with Jared Kushner. Okay? And then the dots get weirder. Another bank, Deutsche Bank, has given Jared Kushner a mysterious $285 loan. And Deutsche Bank, although it is much more of a very real bank. In other words, VEB Bank has been under investigation because it doesn't seem to operate as an actual bank. It doesn't have any of the normal paperwork on file anywhere. It doesn't have any of the normal capital structures in financial tools. for investment and making money, earning an income for itself anywhere. It just seems to flow money. Deutsche Bank is a much more real bank and has a history of lending money to Donald Trump, also to the tune of several hundreds of millions of dollars, and has been under investigation by some American intelligence agencies, again, for potential Russian money laundering. So, fake news, Russia's fake news, and yet these facts persist. And it's fascinating. No one on the left I've seen has claimed that the investigation is over and that the evidence is ready to be released. No one is claiming that. No one is saying, here's the hardcore top secret evidence. Nobody. What they've reported, and the reporting is very clear, is that here are some facts that we can look up that are like open sourceable, and this investigation is steaming ahead and calling people and subpoenaing for deeper materials that are not open source reportable because they think there's something worth investigating. That's the tone being used by the left echo chamber. And yes, there's then, in terms of the speculative commentary, lots of questions about why is there so much smoke if the president is claiming there's no fire. But there's no out-and-out blatant accusation of being, I'm the one who's crazy saying, hey guys, the odds are he's probably fucking MK Ultra and, was raised in some crazy, before we discovered him, before he came into public life, he probably spent some time in some school that, did crazy, horrible things to him. But I also say that jokingly and laughingly, and only because it's funny when things that are considered fanciful and fake and are used in movies mostly as, devices for fanciful exaggeration of drama turn out to potentially be real. It's quite cool, I think. Cool in a scary way, but there you go. But some of these things are just like, okay, yes, it's quite funny and a self-fulfilling thing. If he's innocent, if President Trump is super clear and innocent, why is he doing such awkwardly they're not incriminating, but they are definitely suspicion-causing, and they are, not enabling. They are not... an innocent president would applaud an investigation and, and hand over, just bear it all, right? Say, I got nothing to hide. Instead, he's just doing all these really bizarre stuff, and these facts keep cropping up. Here's another fact. Nothing about it on Fox News to the best of my ability. I can't watch all the channels all the time, right? I don't have one of those multi-panel things or that much time on my hands. But from what I did when I have scanned, there's no reference to the sort of verifiable fact that Mike Flynn, although he sort of obfuscated it for a while, he ultimately registered as a paid foreign agent, in his case for Turkey, who, through other countries, has ties to Russia. And who Mike Flynn personally, blah, 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 it's right there. Anybody who used to use RT News for, as pro-democracy, anti-Hillary Clinton, video postings has probably seen the footage of Mike Flynn sitting right there next to Vladimir Putin. That's an undeniable thing. It's real. And just as of, I think, yesterday or the day before, Paul Manafort, who's sort of, disappeared off the scene after he was forced to resign and or got fired, whichever it was, he did this really weird thing where he said he would register because the pressure of, leaked and dug up news about money that he was receiving from a country with oligarchic ties to Russia, directly to Putin. He said he would, and then he didn't for a really long time, and then he finally did. Admitting that he received millions of dollars, which either was 2 or 3 degrees away from, multiple millions of dollars. There was only a few degrees away from Putin, some of which was directly from Putin. Now, the money facts are the money facts. Like, accountants are doing, there are forensic accountants doing real work on this. The left is trying to remain as hopeful and sort of go, yeah, well, that kind of stuff generally means some kind of money laundering shit is going on, right? And on the right, they're just supporting the president's claims that it's fake news, and doing other crazy things which don't make any sense. Like, what the fuck is with this off-camera, no-camera, sometimes it's only no audio stuff? Like, in the White House press conference room, the rationale only barely makes sense, okay? That they're going to pick days to turn off the cameras to force the news media that with cameras there that belong in theory, are working in theory on behalf of the people. Whatever your opinion is about the industry, we the consumers of media shouldn't just lambast them or dismiss them. We should hold them accountable, right? And holding accountable is not calling them names. Holding them accountable is saying, hey, I demand that you do your job and do it well, without clusterfuckery or shenanigans. So we got to do it to both government and media. One of the most effective ways of doing that is to get involved. I'm not eligible to run for government for most offices because I was not born in this country. I am here totally legally, but I'm a cybernetic clone of another person from a dimension it's all very complicated. But I'm from another place, I like shorthand is robot from the future, but technically that's taken, so I don't get to use it very often. But it's my show, I'll say what I want. No, I was just born in Mexico, and I came here. My dad is the most interesting man in the world. No, I'm kidding. Although they do look like they could be brothers. Okay, sorry, I'm getting sidetracked. I think that despite the echo chamber tendencies, and the fact that, yes, the vast majority, there's a false sense of diversity because most of them are indeed owned by the same small handful of people. It's not a totalitarianship there yet. Are there tendencies towards going that way? Yes, but there are still people genuinely trying to ask some questions. Are there questions that aren't being asked media-wide? Absolutely. And that's got more to do with our societal culture than any kind of evil, thing. But then again, that's an evil thing, right? The way our societal culture is sculpted. All right, I am severely running out of time, and there are still plenty of more newsy things to talk about. I just think it's fascinating that while, a war goes on in Syria that should be called World War III, and a level of violence of Americans against Americans, particularly those who are paid to, in theory, protect and serve Americans, is being conducted. It's almost to the level of being a war. That our leaders and our media are obsessed with other things. There's another thing that I really want to talk about that's in the news that's really shocking and mind-boggling. That's exactly to do with this, but I'm going to have to do a part 2 today to be able to ramble about that. Thank you for tuning in. Join us again in a second. This has been News Breaking News, part 1 for today. We'll be back in just a bit. Oh yeah, I forgot to say, shout out to Don Lemon. CNN is getting bashed for what they did in the freezing room, but I say shout out to Don Lemon and another guy, Joe Acosta.